wasn't always just a single shade, a palette full of gray in reverie. And I can burn it brighter than the sun. I have a golden gun inside of me. Don't box me in, don't, or I'll leave. I'd rather be a dreamer, I'd rather be free, I'd rather be a leader, I'd rather be a queen, I'd rather be a singer in a trashy cover band. I'd rather be a closer, I'd rather be clean, I'd rather be a poser in a magazine, I'd rather be pretty much anything else. And if I fall behind, ignoring all the signs, and if I lose the fight, I still rage against the night. Don't box I'd rather be a dreamer, I'd rather be free, I'd rather be a leader, I'd rather be a queen, I'd rather be a singer in a trashy cover band. I'd rather be a closer, I'd rather be clean, I'd rather be a poser in a magazine, I'd rather be pretty much anything else than your machine.
Welcome to the Tuesday stream. I hope everyone's having an awesome Tuesday. Welcome, everybody. Derry Bennett, Michael Hassler, welcome. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Protests on yesterday. Yes, there was a massive nationwide protest yesterday by the same people, presumably, who did the first wave of protest, the 50-51 folks. So, yeah, I mean, I suspect that more protests are going to happen, which, frankly, they should. So, we'll see. Today, we have a history lesson, folks. Last stream, we talked about how the Nazis and Hitler were able to dismantle democracy within just under 2 months. So to kind of piggyback off that, we have a history video. It's kind of it's a bit of a long video. So just kind of bear with us here. And of course we'll have some headlines at the end, but I think it's important more than ever to become a student of history, particularly the Nazi Germany period, the kind of early to just under mid 1900s, right? Anywhere from like the 1920s to the 1930s. There was a lot of fascist movements that gained power during that time. And I think that it would be wise to study how these things happen, because you may find that there are some uncomfortable parallels that are happening right now. Folks, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, there are many different ways. Thank you all for being here. Please keep liking the stream. Okay, I see you guys on the YouTube. Please keep liking the stream. Subscribe. Keep subscribing. Suggest other people to subscribe. Lend me your eyeballs, folks. Okay? Lend me your eyeballs, please. And spread the word. If you want to keep up with the channel, join the Discord, folks. I usually make any announcements on the Discord. So if you want to keep up with the channel and any news on that, go on the Discord and subscribe to the Substack. If you want to support the channel directly, consider checking out the merch store and hitting !tip. Once again, thank you all. John Oliver is back on. Yeah, I see. He's doing his show again, right? Welcome, Echo Resto Dragon. It's been a minute since I've watched John Oliver. History lesson, folks. Very important.
Is part of the History Hit Network.
In post-World War I Germany, the law had been a most respected entity, with the country regaining some stability, in part due to capable lawyers and judges, many of them Jewish. In 1933, No law could inhibit Germany's political and military rise to power. In a step-by-step process, the National Socialist government dismantled constitutional law, usurped justice, and created a lethal totalitarian system that soon engulfed Germany and all of Europe.
Echo Wrestle Dragon with a tier 1 sub for 13 months. Thank you so much. I appreciate the support. Thank you. Republicans have already brought us the shame and historical significance that comes with being the only generation of Americans who elected an out-on-bail felon to our nation's highest office. Well, I have to look more into that claim. However, yeah, he is a convicted felon. Judge Bipedal Meatbag, welcome. Judge Chutkan has denied an emergency motion for a TRO against temporary restraining order against Elon Musk and Doge, citing insufficient evidence of imminent irreparable harm to the states despite recognizing potential constitutional issues. Phenomenal stuff. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Redefining the nation as a pure political and biological organism, the Nazi government imposed legislation that reinforced its ideological program in all aspects of German life, with a focus on race, business, religion, and medicine.
Adolf Hitler is dead. He is dead, and how he died, the world little cares. For Hitler's death, millions have prayed, and millions are now thankful for justice. 1920, Hitler began. He was considered just a joke then, a raving crackpot.
Yeah. Sound familiar? Thank God Trump and co are utterly incompetent dipshits who can't pass a bill for a wall, much less dismantle democracy. Not that they don't aspire to. I don't know. I think they're much more equipped. I wouldn't discount them. I wouldn't discount them at all. They said that Hitler was a crackpot and a joke, and yet, here we are. So I wouldn't just quite discount that. Like, not that you're wrong in the sense that they are complete incompetent, some of the worst people that they could possibly select to lead government. I'm just saying, like, don't discount that, especially in the positions of power. They can do a lot of damage just by acting as a sledgehammer. Like, the amount of damage that they've already done, right? The United States will never be the same, right? I hope people understand that. Anyways.
At the dawn of the National Socialist Party in Munich in 1923, a little-known Austrian political upstart by the name of Adolf Hitler naively attempted to overthrow the Weimar government of President Friedrich Ebert. Historically, the Bavarian Beer Hall served as a locale of camaraderie and occasional ideological meetings.
The Beer Hall, which took place in November of 1923, the Weimar Republic, which started out in 1920, was in crisis. Certainly, the Weimar Republic had all kinds of obstacles to try to overcome. Its leaders were seen as responsible for Germany's surrender in World War I, which no one...
Yeah, so kind of like how we are now, suffering an economic crisis brought on by unfettered capitalism, has now led us to this kind of crossroad here. Yeah, Hitler is January 6th, correct. For sure, I'm not minimizing their damage, just my opinion. They've shown themselves to be incredibly stupid and inept. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's gonna dispute that. I'm just saying, like, I think that I think that they can. They're already. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they've already gotten rid of anything remotely close to checks and balances, right? Like, who's stopping them? Nobody. As far as I can tell, nobody's stopping them. Nobody has regained control of the situation of what's happening in the Treasury. Not a damn thing has been done about that. And quite frankly, it's kind of too late. We have no Congress, no congressional oversight. The judge's orders, lawful, lawful decisions by the courts are not being respected. So, I mean, who's stopping them, right? So, like, that by definition is kind of already there, right? If there's no judiciary, if there's no legislative branch, the lower courts are holding, but it's just a matter of time until SCOTUS gets involved. Yeah, which I'm not too confident with SCOTUS, but they don't care. It doesn't matter because they're blatantly disregarding lower court decisions, right?
In Germany expected. They were also seen as responsible for the Versailles Treaty, which all Germans felt was incredibly unfair, even though both the surrender and the need to sign that treaty were really dictated by the generals, who felt that Germany could not sustain further military action.
On November 8th, with 600 stormtroopers led by Ernst Röhm, Hitler descended upon the Bürgerbräu Keller and shouted out, "The national revolution has broken out. The hall is surrounded."
Okay, everyone is trying to come up with crazy ways to skip ads. Like, chill, guys, just download Pi. This Chrome extension takes...
After several speeches by Putsch leaders, Hitler left, wrongly believing the revolution had begun.
If you love history, then you will love History Hit. Our extensive library of documentary features everything from the ancient origins of our earliest ancestors to the daring mission to sink the Bismarck. History Hit has hundreds of exclusive documentaries with months. Just be sure to use the code TIMELINE at checkout.
Having created a political movement out of what was a very small German Workers' Party, Adolf Hitler, inspired by what Benito Mussolini had done in Italy, where he had been able to organize a march on Rome, which put him in a position of power, felt that he could do the same thing. Now, in his case, he had to start from Munich in Bavaria, which is where the Nazi Party had begun and built itself up. And his plan was twofold. He was going to coerce the leaders of Munich and Bavaria into moving out of his way, and he was then going to march on Berlin.
At 11 a.m. on November 9th, Hitler and his followers attempted to take over Munich public buildings. But the armed police and army, alerted to the Nazi Party's actions, fired upon the marchers. This left 16 Nazi martyrs whose blood soaked the swastika banner of the newly formed Nazi Party.
In 1923, there was a great deal of economic turmoil in Germany, and Hitler decided to seize the occasion to try to dismantle the democratic process in Germany and essentially establish a dictatorship. The interesting part of the Beer Hall Putsch is that the putsch itself was so poorly disorganized that he never left the city limits, so that he ended up being tried in a local court. Had he made...
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, for all the people that were, like, complaining and trying to downplay January 6th, like, oh, well, you know, it was just, it was just badly coordinated and there was no, like, attempt there was no attempt at a coup or anything like that. It doesn't matter, man. Like, it definitely was. It doesn't matter if it was not as coordinated. It doesn't matter if it was successful. The fact of the matter is that they tried, okay? And just like Hitler, they realized that violence, outright violence like that, was not going to work. You have to use the tools within the system to destroy democracy.
Made it outside of the city limits, or even on his way to Berlin, he could have been tried for treason in the national court and in fact have faced a death sentence.
Imagine. The riots weren't the coup, it was the fake elector scheme. That's true. That's another... The silent soft coup that was happening. Meanwhile, these were the same people that were pushing the idea that, you know, this election was rigged by the Democrats, question mark?
Landsberg prison, where Hitler wrote his credo of hate during his imprisonment in 1924, following the unsuccessful beer hall putsch. This was a hallowed shrine to official Nazis, but to American GIs, it's just a jail that Hitler never should have left.
Although Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg prison, he was imprisoned less than 9 months, during which time he continued to build his party network and dictate his blueprint for the Nazi Party program. Mein Kampf provided the seminal ideas for the party's attack on Jews and communists, based upon political and racial laws.
Once Hitler realized that he wasn't going to be able to take power by force, he decided he had to use the political processes to attain power. And he manages to build the most successful political party in Weimar Germany and become the most successful leader. And, you know, it's amazing because up until the elections of 1930, it doesn't look like he's getting anywhere.
Right, and like he kind of used and manipulated the system to get where he was, because Hitler was never really that popular. As it was said in the beginning, they thought he was a joke. They thought he was a clown. And just like Trump, Hitler's popularity never really wavered anywhere from, what, the 30-ish%?
He had this idea, build it and they will come, that if he created the infrastructure for a wide-scale political movement, the opportunity would come along. He recruits, he develops propaganda techniques, he learns to use technology, he recruits a successful group of lieutenants. And when the Great Depression strikes, and once again the Weimar Republic is vulnerable, it is Hitler and the Nazis that are in this position to capitalize on that and move to power. But he had always said that he was going to use the Constitution to destroy the Constitution.
Yeah.
And he was going to use the rules of the Republic to destroy the Republic. Certainly the Reichstag fire, which occurs in February of 1933, helps him.
Which was sold as a communist plot, by the way. Consistent Mike, welcome.
Here you see the Reichstag.
Yeah, history rhymes, exactly. Welcome, Mouselander. I'm really stoned right now. How are you? We're hanging in there.
The German House of Parliament in Berlin, which has been seriously destroyed by fire.
The Reichstagsfire was essentially the 9/11 of Germany.
Hey, Mona, welcome. I hope you're well. It's nice here.
Adolf Hitler had been chancellor of the country for less than a month. There were crucial national elections a week away. And suddenly, this very symbol of German democratic process goes up in flames in an arson attack. The Nazis exploited this event to...
I like your channel. Well, I appreciate that. Ladybug, welcome. YouTube crew. YouTube crew is here. Thank you. Welcome, everybody.
To great effect. The Hitler government immediately blames the communists for this, and the next day Hitler approaches the president and he says, we need to suspend civil liberties. Hindenburg was hesitant, but ultimately signed, and that essentially was the first major step in the dismantling of the democratic system.
Yep.
In the atmosphere that existed at that point, a lot of Germans were willing to sacrifice certain liberties for the sake of national security. And once again, I think, given what the United States went through after 9/11, I think one can understand that. And
yeah, that's. I know this is like often attributed to like a false quote, but something to the effect of like, those who sacrifice liberty for security will have neither, or something to that effect. I think that was actually proven to be a fake quote from Benjamin Franklin, I forget. But in any case, like, kind of true. Moen, howdy, welcome. It's 11 degrees where I am. Jeez. It's pretty cold here, too. I'm not gonna lie. It's roughly... 11 degrees is actually close to what we are experiencing Celsius. Join the YouTubes, exactly. And it's gonna get pretty cold in the next couple days. Bad Lefty, hola amigos, welcome. Hey. Man, the whole YouTube crew is here. Look at that. Well, thank you guys for joining.
I'm not saying that the dynamics or even the situation was the same, but it can, if one wants to try to imagine what it was like in Germany at that point. Germany changed with the seizure of power in January 1933, dramatically, but not immediately. It was actually an extended process that the Germans called the Gleichschaltungsprozess.
By labeling the Reichstag fire as a terrorist attack by the communists, Hitler convinced President Paul von Hindenburg to suspend all civil liberties.
Hindenburg did not like Hitler. He could not even stand to be in the same room with the man, but the political constellations of things were such that he appointed Hitler as chancellor. Hitler then, along with the other Nazis, set about systematically dismantling the various pieces of democratic process. Some of it through legal means, some of it just subverting the system and ignoring certain laws.
The first major step in overthrowing the justice system occurred with the suspension.
We had an ice storm earlier, now it's snowing. Jeez, gotta stay warm there. Played that song in junior high. Hey bro, howdy.
Of all civil liberties and the installation of protective custody, or Schutzhaft.
I mean, like, that's pretty much word for word how they justify a lot of these things, right? Like, they say that, like, we have to protect Americans from radical communist antifers. It's the same kind of like train of thought. And the radical antifers should be labeled as domestic terrorists.
What happens in the enabling law is by this time, the Communist Party, as a result of the Reichstag fire, had been declared illegal. And that eliminates a powerful bloc of anti-Nazis from the Reichstag. At this point, Hitler goes to the Reichstag and asks for a 4-year dictatorial regime, which would suspend most civil liberties and virtually create a state of almost permanent emergency powers.
Der uns in den 14 Bildungs gemachten Zusicherungen begann für Deutschland.
At the Kroll Opera House in March of 1933, Hitler proposed the law for removing the distress of Volk and Reich. To keep the folk secure, the communist ideological enemies were rounded up and imprisoned.
Yeah, I mean, like, man, scary stuff. Yeah, to protect the blood of the nation. I mean, like, that's literally what Hitler said. That's literally what Trump said, right? That certain groups of people are poisoning the blood of the well, Hitler said the blood of the nation, blood of the country is what Trump said, but a distinction without a difference. It's almost verbatim, right? Like, I mean, I can't really get any more clear than that. Yeah, it all sounds too familiar.
Hier wird ein Gesetz alles Handeln bestimmen.
Sharpie Diesel, welcome.
Lebt nicht für die Wirtschaft und die Wirtschaft existiert nicht für das Kapital, sondern das Kapital dient der Wirtschaft und die Wirtschaft dem Volk.
One of the pro-communist anti-Nazi lawyers caught in the web was Hans Litting, who had defended communists against the wrath of violent Nazis, even daring to question Hitler on the stand for 3 hours in a 1931 trial. Hitler never forgot what he viewed as humiliation at the hands of Litting, and eventually deemed the prominent attorney an enemy of the state.
Hey, that sounds very freaking familiar. That sounds very, very familiar. Far too close to be an accident. Oh, 100%. Like, just to be clear, like, it's been said that I forget which close person to Trump said that he did have, like, Hitler speeches. He did have copies of Hitler speeches. Like, yeah, I mean, it's not an accident. That is correct. Yeah, history is it's rhyming way too much. Okay, it's rhyming way too much. But yeah, you know, this is too on the nose, right? Like, we have Trump being tried and convicted of fraud, and he says that this is a politically motivated witch hunt, and that these prosecutors should face consequences. Yeah, so I mean, like, man. Oh, Ivana said that, if I remember correctly. Okay, yeah. I couldn't remember who the person was that was close to Trump. But yeah, that makes sense. Soul Life, I have returned back again. Sorry, I had to feel. Hey, it's okay. It's all right. Welcome. Yeah, look where she ended up. Yep.
Sent to a concentration camp, this honorable half-Jewish attorney paid for his integrity.
And you know, if like, I'm pretty sure that if Trump had the option, he would send people like Alvin Bragg, Letitia Peekaboo James, and Fannie Willis definitely to jail. Like, he would have absolutely no problems sending the prosecutors that went after him to jail. And the rougher under a bunker, poor lady. Yep.
5 years of Nazi torture in a concentration camp, Litting committed suicide. In March 1933, in an effort to confine the enemies of the state, An old munitions plant on the outskirts of Munich became the first Nazi concentration camp.
Dachau.
From that time on, virulent anti-Semitism dominated the philosophy of the fast-growing party throughout the 12-year Reich.
Oh, I mean, like, that was kind of like par for the course in the beginning, right? Like, that was like the thing, right? You need to get rid of political enemies, and then you go after the other, right? The source of the nation's problems. The source of the nation's problems, which Hitler attributed to Jewish people. In this case, Trump is attributing this to immigrants who are not white. Trump's Hitler Speeches was his only book on the bedside table. There you go. That's the story that I'm remembering. So yeah, it's not definitely no accident that the bros talking just like Hitler. Like, it's not out of nowhere that he chose the words, immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, right? Like, that's not an accident.
Hitler's 25-point National Socialist Party stressed the importance of segregating Jews from Aryan society.
They forget to mention that Hitler was inspired by American Jim Crow laws. Yeah, and Manifest Destiny inspired Lebensraum? I don't know how to pronounce it, but whatever. I was in top chat.
And soon led to abrogating all of their legal, civil, and political rights.
Globus, welcome. Lebensraum. Yeah, there you go. That's what I'm looking for. Right. Living space. Yep. Welcome, Globus. Hey, folks, do Globus a favor and go check him out. All right, go show him some love too.
On April 7th, 1933, Parliament established its first major law to curtail the rights of Jewish citizens, the law for the restoration of the professional civil service. According to the Aryan paragraph, Jews were legally excluded from civil service positions. On the same day, a law was imposed that prevented Jews from admission to the bar.
I'm pretty. He is indeed. I didn't know Trump tried to get Andrew Tate freed. Not surprising. I didn't see. I kind of saw. I glanced at discourse about that, but that I honestly thought it was fake. So I kind of didn't really dig too much into it. But now, now that I'm thinking about it, it actually kind of makes sense, right? Like, predators protect predators.
This legal assault had devastating consequence for Jewish lawyers. For the most part, Aryan attorneys were pleased, and few voiced any negative reaction to such violations of justice.
The history of Jewish lawyers in Nazi Germany really follows
Globus has a YouTube too. Go subscribe.
An arc from the unification of Germany in the 1870s.
Gotta help each other out.
through the Nazi era. With the unification of Germany, Jewish lawyers for the first time were allowed to enter into the legal profession. And they flowed into the legal profession, and they became very prominent in the legal profession. When the Nazis came into power in the winter of 1933, they immediately tried to reverse the emancipation of Jews and the liberal legal order which had allowed Jews to become part of it and in which Jews had played such an important role. The Nazis round up its opponents. It arrested within several days 4,000 of its political opponents. Among them were Jewish lawyers. But at that point, the Nazis were arresting its political opponents, not Jews as Jews, not Jewish lawyers as Jewish lawyers. But within several weeks, it became clear that the Nazis were going to target Jewish lawyers as well. There were attacks on courthouses organized by SA thugs who would enter into the courthouses, who would throw out Jewish lawyers, would throw out Jewish judges. Violence served a purpose for the Nazis. They used it to its full extent. They used it quickly, and they scared people. But
Yeah. I just saw it scrolling past the Kyle Kalinske thumbnail. Gotcha. I mean, like, yeah, you know, it doesn't surprise me, honestly, right? Like, these kind of, like, freaks protect each other. So, yeah. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell to stay notified. Exactly.
Nazis also realized that violence had its limits and that they could also use law in order to promote their agenda.
Hitler claimed that Nuremberg was the most German of cities, with a tradition that aligned itself with the nationalism of the 1930s. Known from medieval times as a city that burned Jews at the stake, Nuremberg continued to fuel animosity during the Third Reich. The city hosted the party rallies and also served as the venue for the promulgation of the Nuremberg Laws. Hitler used the 1935 National Socialist Party Congress in Nuremberg to launch these infamous race laws. For Hitler, blood purity ensured the vitality of the 1,000-year Aryan Reich as defined in the Nuremberg Laws of September 15, 1935.
Hi, I'm JT, and I made Result Hunter, the search engine for conservatives. Let me just tell you what it does. First
Let me
of
just
all,
tell you,
big tech-
it's probably bullshit.
Hitler used the 1935 National Socialist Party Congress in Nuremberg to launch these infamous race laws. In this way, the government revoked Reich citizenship for Jews and prohibited Jews from marrying or having sexual relations with individuals of German or related blood.
Yeah, YouTube auto captions sometimes get a little funny. Search engine for conservatives, data, also known as data scraping and site blocking. Yeah. German conservatives paved the way for Nazis. Conservatives love to carry water for fascists. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. It's you know, capital, right? The capital class will always tend to carry water for fascists and usually favor conservative parties because they're just trying to protect their wealth, right? So fascism is at the door when capitalism starts to spiral into crisis, as we're seeing now. Arian Musk.
These Nuremberg laws, they were the ones that really prescribed citizenship for Jews. Citizenship was something that would be granted, like a license. Only citizens had rights of citizenship. The second law was about keeping the purity of race. And it begins by prohibiting any kind of marriage between an Aryan and a Jew. It spells it out. If there is already a marriage, it's invalid. There were prescriptions, no kind of sexual relations. That was going to take a little bit of policing. And there was a provision that no non-German, Jewish or other, female servant could be kept in the house of Aryans under 45. That was going to go into effect a little bit later. The bulk of the law went right into effect the next day.
Ist der Versuch der gesetzlichen Regelung eines Problems, das im Falle des abermaligen Scheiterns dann durch Gesetz zur endgültigen Lösung der Nationalsozialistischen Partei übertragen werden müsste. Hinter allen drei Gesetzen steht die Partei und mit ihr und hinter ihr die deutsche Nation.
But with these laws, there was so much exclusion. Jews were really being excluded from public life. They had no rights.
It didn't matter whether you were a religious Jew or not to Hitler. If you had a quarter to an eighth of your background Jewish, you were Jewish. So it wasn't a religious thing. It was a racial, ethnic. And so if you had a Jew, even if you converted, you were still Jewish according to the racial laws, based on your background, based on your lineage. And so it was a eugenic and genetic and hereditary. And it was all caught up in social Darwinism, but it was a genetic, and that was a different kind of anti-Semitism.
Whoever subscribed on YouTube, thank you. Keep it up, folks.
Through legal machinations, the Jewish community was also forced out of the medical profession and denied civil rights.
Basically, starting out in 1933, it was made extraordinarily difficult, almost impossible, for Jews to practice either profession of law or the profession of medicine. They were essentially outlawed from those two professions. And they were a major portion of those professions at the time. So, some people argue that this was an economic move, that the doctors and lawyers were happy to get rid of the Jewish doctors and lawyers. And that was part of it, but that's one reason it was supported so much, that no one really came out against it. But it was really a move to get rid of the Jews.
Look at all them sending out their love like Elon. Yep.
It was a disgrace that the other doctors and lawyers didn't stand up for the Jewish doctors and lawyers. But I think that can be two reasons for that. One was they actually were fine with the Nazi propaganda and racial hygiene, and really believed the Jews were infecting the national body of Germany.
Yeah, and also the people that the thing is, that's part of it. That's part of it, and also the people that did disagree were probably ostracized and threatened, so that they couldn't, because you would be seen as a Jewish sympathizer or whatever. Yeah, heart goes out or whatever BS excuse. Exactly. Genetic purity always leads to genetic collapse. Diversity is required to continue life. Yep.
But economics was not irrelevant. It made those professions much scarcer, therefore they could charge more money, therefore they were more revered. So they had self-interest in that as well.
In the Nazi blueprint for a healthy society, those with disabilities had no place. A Berlin memorial today commemorates some 200,000 deemed not worthy of life by Hitler's manipulation of the law.
So the Nazis proposed racial laws beginning in 1933. That law was called the Law for the Prevention of Hereditarily Diseased Offspring. Now, I think even the language, the wording of that law is important. You're not preventing diseases, you're preventing diseased offspring. And what that law recommended, based on the science of the day, was that people who were considered not to be contributing to the genetic health of the body of the Reich could be forcibly sterilized. And in fact, that law actually said 50,000 Germans a year ought to be sterilized, even if it was against their will, for the good of the Reich. Those racial laws were important because they codified what authors Hoke and Binding had suggested in 1920 in a book in which they coined this phrase, life unworthy of life.
It began with the sterilization programs of Germans, of the retarded and the mentally ill. And so the sterilization program, 1933, the sterilization law, which allowed compulsory sterilization for the feeble-minded, which was a catch-all for anybody you wanted
Rat
to sterilize.
vomit, thank you for the
But
follow.
The sterilization program moved into the child euthanasia program. And the child euthanasia program moved into the adult euthanasia program. Doctors involved in all of this. There were genetic sterilization courts where two physicians and a lawyer sat on the sterilization court. One physician had to be an expert on eugenetics or hereditary, and so they decided almost universally to allow sterilization. But after that, moved on to the euthanasia program, which is a misnomer, by the way. It was a murder. It wasn't euthanasia. These were not terminally ill people. It was just murder.
The strategy of Hitler's political regime was to undermine, dismantle, and decimate all ties to traditional religion. The government attempted to have the Volk aspire to a single national Reich Church under Reichsbishop Ludwig Müller.
Lieber Herr Reichsbischof, im Namen unseres Führers Adolf Hitler und im Namen der ganzen deutschen Jugend
Bishop Clemens von Galen risked his life by giving an anti-euthanasia sermon in Münster on August 3, 1941. Due to his strong protest, the euthanasia policy was scaled back.
In 1937, the relationship between the church and state in Germany had reached a point where there was great tension, specifically on the freedom of Catholic organizations, the arrest of Catholic clergy, and the situation of Catholic schools and religious education being taught in schools, and the future question of Catholic youth groups and ministry to youth. And with that, the German bishops were so concerned that they petitioned the Holy Father, the Pope, to do something about that, to try to protest. The result, with input from the German bishops, was an encyclical, Mit brennender Sorge, with burning desire, with burning concern, stating that the German Catholic
Zaxby's just out-Phillied the Philly with our signature crispy chicken fingers, salt.
Church.
Nah, relax, Zaxby's. You're pretty mid as it is. I didn't know he also went after euthanasia. This is why everything the fascists do needs to be resisted. They back down. Right, like, just to be clear, like, fascists are usually bullies, and bullies are at heart cowards. If you stand up to a bully, they fold.
Was under persecution, and that the Reich government was in no way following what it promised to do in the Reich-Vatican Concordat agreement. That statement was actually read on Palm Sunday from the various pulpits throughout Germany. The Gestapo tried to confiscate any of the printed copies throughout. They allowed them to be printed, but then they confiscated them throughout the Reich. But the information and the protest was lodged, and it was heard very clear.
The Reich passed the law for the restoration of the professional civil service. And while this did not require the churches to employ only non-Jewish pastors, many in the churches, certainly not all, but many sought to implement that policy in the church. There were antagonistic policies on the part of the Reich towards the churches. So in 1937, the confessing church seminaries, which had been operating for a few years, were closed down. They were declared illegal, so they had to go underground to talk about the Bible, to train people for ministry and these sorts of things. Then in 1939, all of the confessional schools, both Protestant and Catholic, were closed throughout Germany. So there was a very antagonistic approach on the parts of the regime. So when we talk about the persecution of the Christian churches, and in particular the Protestant church, I think it's important to emphasize that the churches were rather aggressively pursued by the Nazis in the early years from 1933 to 1937. There were plenty of laws that were passed against them.
If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Never back down to these freaks. Exactly. uBlock Origin Extension should take care of those ads for you. It's YouTube friendly and it works out of the box, but you might have to tweak it for your monetary needs. Yeah, I've seen like a couple of potential options, but you know.
In the Third Reich, Jehovah's Witnesses faced a unique choice with regard to their faith.
And to see how they have grown, we have seen how he has guided them as they made the truth their own.
Well, they behaved them like other traitors. For example, if women weren't prepared to work in the factories to construct weapons, they were sentenced to death. And that had been the same with men who weren't prepared to go to the army. They didn't have a particularly feeling against the belief system of Jehovah's Witnesses. They didn't know the system. They only had the notion that Jehovah's Witnesses didn't adore the system. They weren't prepared, for example, to do the Hitler greeting, to celebrate Hitler's birthday. It was a great day in National Socialist Germany, and that was sufficient. That was it. And they were surprised how strong these small group of believers resisted them.
In the Third Reich, Jehovah's Witnesses faced a unique choice with regard to their faith.
Witnesses were offered to sign a paper to end their relationship with the organization, with the Watchtower Society, and then they could be free. But they didn't do that, and that's the difference to the situation of the Jews. The situation of the Jews, even if the assimilated Jews who didn't even know that their fathers and grandfathers had been Jews, hadn't any chance to flee.
Be fair, Jehovah's Witnesses are annoying. Sorry. Yeah, I don't think that's the point though. Hitler was a tanky? No.
The system because of their blood.
The Jews were the most persecuted. for both religious and racial reasons. From October 1939, they were relocated into large urban ghettos in Warsaw, Lwów, Lublin, and Krakow. To control these communities with a false sense of law and order, the Nazis established the Judenrat, a Jewish council within each ghetto. These forced liaisons between council members and Nazi overseers still remain a sensitive subject today.
Once you are in the ghetto, you basically in the camp to die. All the laws, Germans start with the legal things. They come to the country and they say Jews cannot have a property, Jews cannot have radios, Jews cannot have fur. I mean, all the occupation laws function before the ghetto. Once you are in the ghetto, it's just waiting for death. There's no more law in the ghetto. There are law, but there are Jewish law by Jewish Judenrat. Jews were already deprived of the basic things, and then creating of the Jewish district, of the ghetto, was the final German occupation law, which was based, of course, on a big lie, on a hypocrisy, that actually now, where Jews were already second-class citizens, and to protect them from anti-Semitism, from the conflict with the Christian population, apparently it will be better for them if the part of the city will be designated for them so they can have their own governance. So my father, who was an engineer in woodworking, construction, was working for the needs of the Jewish Council of Judenrat.
That is the most controversial question about the Shoah. It's about the Jews collaborating. Some say of their own will, some say that they've been forced to, but they were collaborating with the Nazis.
You're right, I'm being a wee shy. Nah, you're good.
Now, the big question is, which kind of collaboration was it? If it was voluntarily, then of course it's a terrible thing. But since we know that the totalitarian regime of the Nazism made people to do things that they would never do in otherwise. And in the concept of what Katzetnik, he was one of the inmates in Auschwitz, and then he became to be a writer and a witness in Eichmann trial, he called it another planet. So in this other planet that have its own rules, have its own language even, people acted differently because they were under a force, under a threat, and they had to manage somehow their own communities. They had to survive. That was always like that. That's how they survived.
The only controversy was kind of...
And today we have Gaza, never again accept...
...of ethical one, whether a Jewish person should help Germans to keep order. They were keeping order with the Jews under Germans' orders, obviously. Of course, the other solution would be not to have any community organization. It was absolutely a necessity.
On December 7th, 1941, Himmler reinforced Hitler's directive Nacht und Nebel, night and fog, a policy that summarily bypassed the law by relying upon special German courts to sentence suspects in occupied territories to concentration camps. Under the cover of darkness, they simply disappear.
BRB, leaving for work, awesome. Hey, no problem. Thank you for stopping by. Now, this would be like, circumventing constitutional rights afforded to immigrants by just shipping them off to Guantanamo Bay.
In time of war, treason was punishable by death. As chief judge of the People's Court, Roland Freisler, the hanging judge, frequently chose to enforce the death penalty for many of those who stood before him pleading for justice. Between 1943 and 1945, the People's Court sentenced approximately 7,000 people to death. Maniacal in his tone and harsh in his judgments, Freisler oversaw two historical cases: the members of the White Rose and the conspirators of the July 20th, 1944 assassination plot against Hitler. At the University of Munich, members of the White Rose resistance produced 6 leaflets against the Third Reich. Hans and Sophie Scholl, along with their colleague Christoph Probst and their mentor Kurt Huber.
That's freaking awesome. If you've ever seen the story about the White Rose movement, about the White Roses, pretty freaking awesome.
Were deeply committed to the high ideals of the White Rose movement. Condemned as conspirators against the government, they were sentenced to death for treason during wartime.
Stop researching with ChatGPT. Its information is not reliable.
Yeah, but don't worry, my AI is good. They learned all the lessons except the most important one. When you become obsessed with the enemy, you become the enemy.
Firma. Na, die gehört aber zur schwarzen Fraktion. Ja, das sieht man Ihnen an. Das ist klar, das kann ja nicht anders sein. Das ist ja ulkig. Wie wichtig wohl das Amt des Zivilanwalts da gewesen sein muss, das Sie gehabt haben, dass Sie nicht mal Anwalt, nicht mal Soldat geworden sind mit dem Alter. Und dann von da sind Sie dienstverpflichtet worden. Spricht ja auch für Ihre Haltung, dass Sie erst gewartet haben, bis man Sie dienstverpflichtete. Feines Früchtchen. Ja, feines Früchtchen. Sie haben gewartet, bis man Sie dienstverpflichtete. Und zwar, wo sind Sie hingegangen?
Tails and Wings, thank you for the follow. Welcome.
Outside Stalingrad, the icy winter becomes a fiery hell.
Stories about the atrocities committed by the Nazis began to leak out of Europe, primarily in 1942 and 1943. We actually have documentation from the British in particular, in which British officials are already talking about death camps, places where Jews in particular were being murdered by the hundreds of thousands by poison gas. You can find references to this in government documents from the British already in late 1942, early 1943. So there was a level of awareness already of the scale and the immensity of the crimes being perpetrated. Of course, in 1943 then, Battle of Stalingrad, early 43, Battle of Stalingrad is one of the major turning points. It really looks from this point forward, after the defeat of the Sixth Army, that Nazi Germany's days were numbered.
This was Kyle and Kessel with a vengeance, but the Nazis were getting Kesseled instead of the Russians. And on February the 2nd, 1943, after 162 days of the heaviest fighting in the history of warfare, the last shot was fired. Peace came to Stalingrad. In the shattered streets, the blasted ruins, the ghastly evidence of their ordeal, the defenders of the city greet the rescuing army of the dawn. Stalingrad is free. The Nazis had capitulated.
General Eisenhower informs me
that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. For this victory, we join in offering our thanks to the Providence which has guided and sustained us through the dark days of adversity.
You see the Allies now beginning to think in terms of what they're going to do with the major war criminals, as they were called. These were the leadership, the leading figures of the Nazi government, Hitler, Goering, Goebbels, and so forth. How are they going to be treated? Churchill and his legal counselor, Lord John Simon, were of the view that the major war criminals were essentially outlaws who did not have to be given their day in court, but could in fact be taken, arrested, identified, of course, and then executed without the benefit of a trial.
These generals, 24 of them, who had covered themselves with such glory and such medals on the fields of Poland and Norway and France, they now had only their past glory to comfort.
Very clearly, the Soviets did not have in mind a trial or a proceeding along the lines of an Anglo-American litigated proceeding. They had in mind instead a show trial, not unlike the Stalinist show trials of the 1930s, in which Stalin was able to identify his alleged enemies, charge them with various imaginary crimes, and secure their conviction and then have them executed in the 1930s. This is the proceeding which they wanted to impose upon the major war criminals. The Soviet foreign minister, Molotov, had already talked with the Allies on behalf of the Soviet government and tried to persuade them that the best way to deal with the major war criminals was by means of a special international tribunal. Stimson was of the view that a special international tribunal could be used in which the major war criminals would be prosecuted, but they would enjoy the same kinds of due process rights which any American accused of an offense would enjoy, the right to hear the charges against them.
I love the way Mid-Atlantic accent says Nazis. I want my scalps.
Right to study the indictment, the right to counsel, and the right
Nazis.
to defend themselves in a fair proceeding.
Nuremberg remained a focal point for the National Socialist Party, hosting popular rallies and political congresses starting in 1927. It continued through the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, and again in November 1945, the focus was on Nuremberg, as the city became the seat of the International Military Tribunal to address war crimes and crimes against humanity.
The drums of doom begin to beat for 24 top Nazis as Nuremberg becomes the scene of the War Crimes Tribunal. Among the ruins of this former shrine of Nazism, an ordinary jail houses its former big shots. Each has a solitary cell and is forbidden to talk during exercise. Under indictment are Arthur Sykes Inquart, former Gauleiter of Holland; Julius Streicher, fanatical anti-Semite; Rudolf Hess, one-time adjutant of Hitler; and Hermann Goering.
Chief U.S. Prosecutor at Nuremberg, Robert Jackson, stated in his diary that the court was charged with establishing a rule of law in the place where it had been said there would be no more law.
What is the advantage of conspiracy? It afforded the government, the Allied government, with the opportunity to charge the Nazis with a substantive offense as well as participation in a criminal organization, which meant that you did not necessarily have to show an individual criminal act committed by the defendant. What's interesting about conspiracy, again, is that it connects all of the individual charges against the Nazis. So in addition to
like a RICO case. One giant RICO case.
Charging with the Nazis was with war crimes, or with crimes against peace, or crimes against humanity. They are also charged with conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, conspiracy to commit crimes against humanity, and conspiracy to commit war crimes. So, conspiracy, again, this notion of a criminal organization, the criminal plan to conquer the world, that was the foundation that underlay the entire case, especially on the American side.
One after another, the prosecutors came forward to state the case against the criminals. The first to speak was Robert Jackson.
In the prisoner's dock sit 20 odd-broken men. reproached by the humiliation of those they have led, almost as bitterly as by the desolation of those they have attacked. Their personal capacity for evil is forever past. It is hard now to perceive in these miserable men as captives the power by which, as Nazi leaders, they once dominated much of the world and terrified most of it. We will show them to be living symbols of racial hatred, of terrorism and violence, and of the arrogance and cruelty of power.
The Allies really learned of Nazi war crimes when the Nazis embarked on aggressive war. The core theory of the Nuremberg prosecution is that the aggressive war itself was a crime. It's an overarching theory of criminality, and then within the war there are battlefield war crimes. But really from the time Germany went on the march in 1939 into Poland, there was Allied thinking, particularly American and British thinking, that this was illegal, it violated treaties, it was criminal.
Raphael Lemkin provided Jackson with the foundation for this international law, establishing a paradigm for prosecution of war crimes.
Took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say this is like an OG RICO law case, right?
Based upon his research of the massacres of more than 1 million Armenians by the Ottoman Turks, Lemkin created the hybrid word genocide.
The very term genocide had only been coined a year before the Nuremberg trial started. It was coined in 1944 by Raphael Lemkin, who was a Polish-Jewish advisor to the U.S. War Department. That term genocide was already used as a descriptive term at Nuremberg, but it wasn't until the UN Convention of 1948 that genocide became recognized as its own independent crime in international law.
In an incremental way, expanding from Germany into the East and occupied nations, Nazi perpetration is a visible thing. What it adds up to, and that it's a planned extermination venture, is something that is, very barely understood, not just during the war years, but even as they're embarking on prosecution. They're really almost sort of discovering what we would call the Holocaust as they're prosecuting it, and getting evidence and realizing the enormity of what they're dealing with.
This would be a way of showing the superior political power, the superior moral power of a kind of a liberal democratic regime, right? So by not pursuing a purely political strategy with respect to the Nazis, but by giving them a fair trial, it was a way of saying, we're gonna give you the chance you never gave your enemies, and it's gonna show that we're stronger and that this is a better path for the future. So it was there was a moral argument for it, but there was also a very profound kind of political argument that this would be a more effective tool for preserving the peace going forward.
The Allies chose to take the moral high ground by providing fair trials. 22 high-ranking Nazi leaders were put on trial for crimes against humanity and crimes against the peace. The historic Nuremberg courtroom 600 is still used for trials today.
The Nazis committed astonishing crimes that we're all very familiar with. Nuremberg was not in the first order a Holocaust trial. It really was, as I mentioned, it was a trial about the launching of aggressive war. But nonetheless, if you look back at Nuremberg, the prosecutors did a pretty impressive and a pretty responsible job of bringing the crimes that the Nazis had committed against the European Jews to the courtroom.
The extensive trials concerning Nazi criminality have continued into the 21st century, with attempts to balance both justice and mercy.
Then there are a series of Allied trials.
1948, the first use of genocide as a criminal offense under international law, the Nakba and setup of Israel as a state, things that make you go,
Most famous of these are the so-called successor trials, also held in Nuremberg before an American military tribunal. These prosecuted functional elites from throughout Nazi society. So there was a trial for doctors, there were a trial for judges, there was a trial of the high command of the army, right? So a series
business
of
leaders,
trials of different elements of the Nazi elite. But there were also Allied military trials Soviet, British, French, and American of war criminals lower ranking, right? So the Americans held a trial at the Dachau concentration camp, or a series of trials at the Dachau concentration camp in which hundreds of Nazis were prosecuted. The British had their own trial program, as did the French. The Russians prosecuted about 30,000 Germans for war crimes. Now, these were Russian trials. How fair they were, is anybody's guess. But given the level of Nazi criminality, I always say it's a little bit like shooting fish in a barrel. Even the Russians managed to find a lot of guilty people in that context.
As the Cold War broke out in the wake of an apocalyptic conflict, history had to be rewritten, reframing the Nuremberg trials within the context of victor's justice. Nuremberg still stands as a memorial to international justice, a reminder of the devastating consequences caused by unlawful manipulation of constitutional law for political and racial purposes. The criminal leaders of the Third Reich forced humanity to pay a heavy price.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably learn a lesson here. Maybe the guy talking about, maybe the known con man, okay? Maybe the known con man who has done nothing, but jump from con after con after con his entire career. Maybe that guy, talking about, how a certain group of people are poisoning the blood of our country. Maybe, we can avoid all of this, right? By maybe just not having this guy in power. To be all that Russian shade. To be fair, they won World War II and lost more than any other ally doing so. Yep. That's true. BRB, no problem. We're going to get into some headlines here. I'm already getting hungry, folks. So if you haven't seen what's been happening, Mayor Eric Adams got himself out of prosecution for corruption in a blatant quid pro quo, and has essentially capitulated or offered to bend the knee to Trump and his Gestapo goons in exchange. This is as blatant as it gets. In exchange for the prosecution to go away. Now, in order for this to be completed, a judge kind of has to rule on this, right? You can't just the prosecutors can't just drop a case and that's the end of the case. It doesn't work that way. Now the judge has to make that decision and sign off on it. 8 DOJ prosecutors have resigned over this so far. Yep. Because this is blatant quid pro quo, which is also, incidentally, not legal. Judge calls for prosecutors into court to explain the reasons for abandoning the Eric Adams case. A federal judge overseeing the criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams ordered the mayor and federal prosecutors to appear in court on Wednesday, tomorrow, to discuss the Trump administration's effort to drop the case, a move that has sparked a crisis within the Justice Department and chaos within the Adams administration. just to be clear, also, like, if all else fails, the governor has, I believe, the power to remove Adams. So I believe that at this point, I don't think it matters. I think he should be removed, regardless. If somehow he makes it, okay? If somehow he makes it through all of this, I think that the governor should invoke her power and remove him. But anyways, the U.S. District Judge Dale Ho wrote in an order on Tuesday today that Adams, his lawyers, and prosecutors should be prepared to discuss the prosecutor's rationale for seeking to dismiss the case, the reasons for Adams' agreement to do so, and the procedure for resolving the motion. She does have that power, and she probably won't, leaving it to the election. Shame. Shame. Ho's order is the first indication that he may not quietly accept the department's effort to torpedo the case, in which Adams is accused of bribery and other corruption charges. Some legal experts think the judge has limited power to resist a dismissal, but others believe he could refuse to allow the charges to be dropped. The advocacy group Common Cause has asked Ho to appoint a special prosecutor to take over the case. The effort to drop the case initiated with a top Justice Department official, Emil Bove, who last week directed the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office to seek a dismissal of the charges against Adams, a Democrat. Bove wrote in a memo to the office that the case has improperly interfered with the mayor's re-election campaign and could hurt his ability to support Trump's immigration agenda. I mean, like, that is as blatant as it gets, right? Because it's very clear, like, there's no ambiguity, there's no room for misinterpretation here. It could hurt the ability of Trump's to enact Trump's immigration agenda. So we need this guy to go, to be let off, right? Like, that is explicitly a quid pro quo, right? And of course, Mayor Adams has already publicly stated that he is going to allow the Gestapo to do what it needs to do. He's already publicly said that he is open to allowing the Gestapo to enter Rikers, I believe. If I remember correctly, he made that very publicly known, or he made that comment in public. Redmond Barry, welcome. How could someone actually write that down with no euphemisms? This is coming from this administration that believes that laws do not apply here. That's why it's so blatant. Because they know that the laws are not, like, so no one's stopping them, so why should they care if they're openly advocating for quid pro quos? Why should they care if that's illegal, right? Like, they don't care. No one's enforcing the laws. Congress isn't doing its job. A judge's orders are being ignored, so, like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, they could just do stuff out in the open because no one's stopping them. Bove also wrote that the decision wasn't based on the strength of the evidence or on legal theories underpinning the case. So, like, I mean, there's nothing else to say here, right? Like, yeah, you know, I don't know, man. Like, it's not based on the strength of the evidence, because we have that, or legal theories. It's just literally like, we want to make sure this guy is there to support Trump's immigration agenda, right? Like, this is, like, not even, like, the problematic part, right? Because, like, you know, politicians make this argument all the time. But, like, this is really it right here. This is it. That is the explicit quid pro quo, right, between the federal the Department of Justice intervening here on Mayor Adams' behalf. Bove's order to abandon the case triggered a wave of resignations, as Michael Hessler pointed out, from lawyers in the Justice Department, in the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department in Washington. Danielle Sassoon, the acting U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, alleged that Bove and Adams appeared to be engaged in an improper deal. In her resignation letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Sassoon recounted a January 31st meeting with Adams' lawyers in which she said Adams' attorneys repeatedly urged what amounted to quid pro quo. There you go. Indicating that, again, that's just not me misusing that term. It's literally like a lawyer is using this term, indicating that Adams would be in a position to assist Trump's the department's enforcement priorities only if the indictment were to be dismissed. Sassoon argued that dismissing the case would amount to rewarding Adams for an improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for the dismissal of the case. One of the lead prosecutors in the Adams case, Hagen Scotton, echoed the allegation of impropriety in his own resignation letter. Adams and his lawyers have repeatedly denied a quid pro quo, but in a letter dated February 3rd, his lawyer wrote that if Mayor Adams is removed from office, he would be replaced by, at least temporarily, by public advocate Jumaine Williams, a frequent outspoken critic of Mayor Adams' desire to protect New Yorkers by combating the migrant crisis. So, I mean, like, yeah. There you go. Cole's response to the Justice Department's efforts was also predicted by Sassoon. In her resignation letter, Sassoon warned Bondi that dropping the case against Adams wouldn't be straightforward because Ho would likely conduct a searching inquiry concerning the reasons for the dismissal. The result, she wrote, would be detrimental to the Justice Department's reputation regardless of the outcome. Yeah, I mean, like, let's dispense with, like, the niceties here. That's already, like, done, right? Like, why would I trust... There's nothing here. Why would I trust the justice system, right? Even before Trump is already pretty screwed. But, like, why would we believe and trust the justice system now and the Department of Justice and the courts, right? But in any case, we will follow up with that and see what actually happens with this case, because I'm pretty interested in seeing if Adams actually gets to wiggle out of this one. A very serious corruption case, by the way. Like, blatant. So, yeah. But hey, you know, as long as it's in service to the dear leader, I guess it's excusable. History, right? Crimes can be forgiven as long as it's in service to the nation, right? Like, I'm not, obviously it's not the same, like, with like Nazis getting away from with murder and stuff like that, but like, yeah, it's the same concept as to why the January 6th insurrectionists were let go, right? This might be a way average people can get out of traffic ticket. Drop the ticket, officer. I'll help Trump's immigration policy. Department of Law, not Department of Justice, right? And yeah, so I mean, like, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, right? Crimes can be forgiven as long as they're in the service of the nation. Cool. We've got two more, folks. Trump begins firing of FAA staff just weeks after the fatal DC plane crash. So, yeah, I mean, like, at this point, I would say that folks should probably get really familiar with whatever rails that do exist. Get very familiar with stations and schedules, because let me tell you, like, there's not enough money in the world that would get me on a plane as long as this administration is like, just to be clear, like, this has been like a problem beforehand, but it's about to get, like, seriously bad. And of course the point is to break, right, is to break the FAA so that it could be diverted to Elon Musk's Starlink, right? That's the goal here, to break federal services, to put them in private hands. And this is no different. But yeah, just to be clear, like, you couldn't pay me enough money. Exactly, Michael Hassler. You couldn't pay me. There's not enough money on this planet that would get me on a plane so long as this is a thing. We should really start reading those airplane safety pamphlets on the back of seats. The Trump administration has begun firing several hundred Federal Aviation Administration employees, upending staff on a busy air travel weekend, and just weeks after a January fatal mid-air collision at the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Probationary workers were targeted in the late-night emails on Friday, notifying that they had been fired. Dave Sparrow, the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialist Union, said in a statement, the impacted workers included personnel hired for FAA radar, landing and navigational aid maintenance, one air traffic controller told the AP. The air traffic controller was not authorized to talk to the media and spoke on condition of anonymity. In a message posted to Twitter late Monday, the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, said fewer than 400 FAA employees were fired and 0 air traffic controllers and critical safety personnel were let go. The Transportation Department official told the AP earlier Monday that the agency had retained employees who had performed critical safety functions. In a follow-up query, the agency said that they would have to look into whether the radar, landing, and navigational aid workers affected were considered to handle critical safety functions. What? Hey, very nice TV. Thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Arbor Lynn. Welcome. Welcome back. Very nice TV. Thank you so much for bringing your wonderful community. Alec Jackson, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Folks, if you haven't seen me before, I am a difficult truth. I do the news, I do the politics. We are here usually Monday through Thursday about 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you enjoy your stay, folks, okay, as we're almost to the home stretch, but if you enjoy the content, then feel free to hit the follow button, okay? It's been a while. Hope you're as fine as possible these days. Yep, we're hanging in there. Welcome to Fly at Your Own Risk Airlines. Have any issues? Go F yourself. True. Did you just say they're not sure if the employees that talk to the pilots and landing in planes may not be critical to the process? I was just about to get to that, Wolf Glenn. Seriously, like it's like 404, page not found in my brain here, because like, what are you talking about? You have to look into whether or not the people that that handle the radar, landing, and navigational aid are you have to look into whether or not they're considered to handle critical safety functions. Subscribe to the Substack, yes. Of course, perfect place to raid into, just so happened to tie swell with what I was covering. That's good. I'm glad it worked out that way. By the way, folks, if you haven't done so, okay, please consider checking out very_nice_TV. Fantastic streamer. Very chill vibes. If you've ever been to one of her streams, I highly recommend you go and show some support. That's like saying surgeons may not be critical to an operation. Right, exactly. This is just absurd. This is just absurd. Pure absurdity. Shit's going down, including airplanes. The National, thank you for the kind words. No problem. The National Air Traffic Controllers Association said in a brief statement on Monday it was analyzing the effect of the reported federal employee terminations on aviation safety, the national airspace system, and our members. Other FAA employees were working on urgent and classified early warning radar systems to the Air Force. The Air Force had announced in 2023 for Hawaii to detect incoming cruise missiles through a program that was in part funded by the Department of Defense. It's one of the several programs that the FAA's National Airspace System Defense Program manages that involves radars providing longer-range detection around the country's borders. Due to the nature of their work, staff in the office typically provide extensive knowledge transfer before retiring to make sure no institutional knowledge is lost, said Charles Spitzer Statlander, one of the employees in the branch who was terminated. I wonder how long it will take them to analyze the effects. Yeah. Too bad. Too late, honestly. The Hawaii Radar and FAA Defense Program Office working on it are about protecting national security, said Spitzer Statlander. I don't think that they even knew what the NDP does. They just thought, oh, no big deal. He just works for the FAA. Right. Like, much like, this is not just like, this is the exact problem, right? Because, like, you don't even know what these people are doing, right? You're just axing them for no reason. And it's like they axed the people who are in charge of the nukes. And they were like, oh, shoot, we didn't know the Department of Energy handled that. And then they had to attempt to bring those people back. Hope not too long. It seems the judge won't stop this until they have evidence to prove this is harmful. Right. And even then, like, we're having, like, no one's paying attention. No one's listening to the court orders anyways. Yeah, they need more data. They'll get H-1B peeps in. One second, folks. Vidingale. Thank you. Thank you for the lurk. Appreciate that. No more nukes to Arms America makes it look like an accident. Good Agent Musk. How is the hiring process in the U.S.? Why do they need their official emails? Don't they have their data at the workplace, like a phone number, address? I'm honestly not sure how that works in the federal workforce. I'm be honest, Craftus. I don't know how that works. I assume, right, depending on how classified their work is, they may not, they may have their own, like, government issued stuff. But yeah, and now it all goes through Musk. Exactly. The employee, Sparrow said the message arriving after, sorry. Let's go. Let's scroll a little bit up. This is about protecting national security, and I'm scared to death, said Spitzer Standler, and the American public should be scared too. Sparrow said the messages began to arrive after 7 p.m. Friday and continued late into the night. More might be notified over the long weekend or barred from entering FAA buildings. The employees were fired without cause nor based on performance or conduct, and the emails were from an exec order, Microsoft email address, not a government email address. A copy of the termination letter that was provided to the AP showing the sending address at Ask AHR Executive. Like, I would just flag that as a phishing attempt. The firings hit the FAA as it's facing a shortfall in controllers. Federal officials have been raising concerns about overtaxed and understaffed air traffic control systems for years, especially after a series of close calls between planes and U.S. airports. Among the reasons they have cited staffing shortages are uncompetitive pay, long shifts, intensive training, and mandatory retirements. in the January 29th fatal crash between the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter and American Airlines passenger jet, which is still under investigation. One controller was handling both commercial airlines and helicopter traffic at the busy airport. Days before the collision, President Trump had already fired all members of the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, a panel mandated by Congress after the 1988 Pan Am 103 bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland. The committee is charged with examining safety issues at airlines and airports. Cool. Cool. Also, that this is like mandated by Congress. So again, like imagine getting fired over an email, like no papers, no reason for the dismissal, no talking with HR, right? Like, and it's not even like a federal email, but you know, one day you're fired like nothing. Congratulations, now you're homeless. Yeah, don't worry, guys. Everything will be better once Musk and his buddies replace this with tax cuts for themselves. Correct. Has been fired by group phone call before. At least they had the decency to get you on a huge phone call. Although that's pretty crappy, right? That's pretty crappy as it is. Spitzer Stadler suggested he was targeted for firing for his views on Tesla and X, formerly known as Twitter, not as part of a general probationary level sweep. Both companies are owned by Musk, whose Doge, whatever, is leading Trump's effort to cut the federal government. Spitzer Stadler is Jewish and was angered by Musk's straight-arm gesture. No, it was not a straight-arm gesture. It was a Nazi salute. Come on, guys. Come on, AP. On his personal Facebook page, he urged friends to get rid of their Teslas and Twitter accounts in response. Spitzer Stadler said the post drew attention of the Facebook account labeled as Department of Government Efficiency, which reacted with his laughing emoji. Soon after, he saw the same account reacting to much older posts through the personal Facebook feed. Yeah. Cool. There's at least half dozen Facebook accounts labeled as Doge, and it's unclear who operates any of them. White House spokesperson Carolyn Levitt wrote on Monday on Twitter, Doge doesn't even have a Facebook page. Last time I got fired, the boss drove 50 miles to tell me in person, let me keep my workstation and take it home with me. I was lucky. Wow. That's actually pretty lucky nowadays. Let's call it a Muskian salute then. I had no warning though. Oof. Less than a week later, I was fired despite my position allegedly being exempted due to national security, said Spitzer Stadler wrote in a post over the weekend on LinkedIn. He added, when Doge fired me, they turned off my computer and wiped all my files without warning. Yeah, like, how is any of this legal? Right? How is any of this legal? Who is stopping them? That's the question. Doge did not immediately respond for a request for comment. The firings were first reported by CNN. Also, like, yeah, there's no transparency. We have no idea how much information these people have. Yeah, it's not exactly. The Trump administration gives school a deadline to end DEI programs or risk losing federal money. So yeah, they're mafia style threatening schools. So cool. Will Black History Month be classified as DEI? Yes, it is. In fact, the Army is skipping out on it, I think. I'm sure some chunkhead will think so. Yeah, I mean, this is not like hyperbole. The Army Corps of Engineers in Jacksonville, Florida canceled a Black History Month in 2025 due to a new guidance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they canceled that celebration. So yeah, that's not hyperbole. Have you seen the video with the Elon Musk cardboard doing the Nazi salute being brought into the Tesla and people kicked that woman out? No, but wow. I don't think anyone can stop you from celebrating Black History Month personally. Right, but like that's not the problem, right? That's not the issue. The issue is that they're doing this they're doing this as a racist kind of thing. Okay? This isn't like this is, just to be clear, this is nothing more than just like a racist thing. To paraphrase an old definition of science fiction, DEI means what a bigot points to when they say DEI. Correct. Correct. You can send that to me, Craftus. The Trump administration is giving America's school and universities 2 weeks to eliminate diversity initiatives or risk losing federal money, raising the stakes in the president's fight against, quote, wokeness. Is St. Patrick's Day DEI for the Irish? I don't know. In a memo Friday, the Education Department gave an ultimatum to stop using racial preferences as a factor in admissions, financial aid, hiring, or other areas. Schools are being given 14 days to end any practice that treats students or workers differently because of their race. Educators at college nationwide are rushing to evaluate the risk and decide whether to stand up for practices they believe are legal. The sweeping demand threatens to upend all aspects of campus operations, from essays on college applications to classroom lessons and campus clubs. It's meant to correct what the memo described as, quote, rampant discrimination in education, often against white and Asian students. Schools have been operating on the pretext that selecting students for diversity, similar euphemisms, is not selecting them based on race, said Craig Traynor, the acting assistant secretary for civil rights. No longer. Students should be assessed according to merit, accomplishment, and character. But they are. Not that I've seen. I thought that affirmative action has been already killed by SCOTUS. This is not affirmative action. Or is it? I can't think what the Supreme Court said on that. But in any case, just to be clear, like this is just simply like the Trump administration being racist, right? Because when they talk about DEI, they just mean like non-white people. That's it, right? Creating a sense of risk around doing work that might promote diverse and welcoming campuses is much more the goal than clear statement of existing law. Exactly. Said Jonathan Fansmith, Senior Vice President of Government Relations at the American Council of Education. An association of college presidents. The memo is an extension of President Trump's executive order banning diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, a legal justification. It cites the 2023 Supreme Court case barring race as a factor for college admissions. I think this is what based Comrade is talking about. Put simply, education institutions may neither separate nor segregate students based on race, nor distribute benefits or burdens based on race. Confusion around the implications of Trump's anti-DEI order was apparent at last week's confirmation hearing for Education Secretary nominee Linda McMahon. Asked whether classes on African American history would run afoul of the president's order, she said she wasn't certain. SCOTUS ruled affirmative action is inherently unconstitutional and discriminatory against Asian students. California School Boards Association is waiting legal guidance so it can advise schools on the Trump administration's deadline. At this point, there's not enough information for a step-by-step playbook that tells school districts if you were doing A, then now you should do B, or perhaps eliminate the whole program entirely. I know people want that granular level of detail, but this is a new era, some with novel civil rights theories, and there's no definitive reference for what's happening right now. Yeah, that's not encouraging. The new guidance aims directly at college admissions, suggesting colleges have sought to work around the Supreme Court's decision. College essays, for instance, cannot be used to predict a student's race, the guidance said. In the Supreme Court decision, Justice Chief Roberts said nothing prevents colleges from considering an applicant's discussion about how race affected his or her life, though he warned that colleges shouldn't use essays and an indirect workaround to consider students' race. Quotas and affirmative action aren't the same thing. AA includes outreach. So SCOTUS killed affirmative action. Look, I don't give a shit, okay? I'm sorry, I just don't give a shit. The point being is that this is an attempt to kill the societal, like, fabric, right, of making sure that people are exposed to one another, right? People from all backgrounds. That's what this is about. This is about enforcing and enacting white supremacy. That's what this is about, okay? And also, incidentally, it serves as a way of controlling education by threatening their funding. The memo said it's also unlawful for colleges to eliminate standardizing testing requirements to achieve a desired racial balance or to increase racial diversity. Dozens of colleges on the U.S. have dropped the SAT and ACT requirements in recent years, citing concerns the exams favor students from higher income families. Which it does, because if you come from a higher income, regardless of race, you have just a way, you have the funds to study for this crap because it's expensive. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen SAT books, if you've ever been to an SAT class, how much tutors for SATs cost or ACTs. It's expensive. Practices that have long been commonplace would become legal liabilities, including recruiting in underrepresented areas or buying lists of potential students with certain academic and demographic information, said Angel Perez, CEO of National Association for College Admission Counseling. Colleges and universities are going to find themselves between a rock and a hard place. They know what they're doing is not illegal, but they're worried that if they do not comply, not having federal funding will decimate them. Some universities said they expect little change. At Oregon State University, Legal Review concluded that its program are fully compliant with state and federal laws, according to a campus message from Rob Odom, the vice president of University Relations and Marketing. Right, so the point stands that if you're wealthy, then you have access to this. The I will include subject matter such as the 6019 project materials and who knows what else. I think Florida has already moved in this direction. Correct. Like, this isn't just like, you know, this false notion of like pretending to care about like equality or whatever. This is about like grievances of white supremacy. The department memo appears to take aim at scholarships for students from certain racial backgrounds. There's been legal debate about whether the Supreme Court decision extends to financial aid, with some schools and institutions deciding to scrap racial requirements for some scholarships. The National Association of Student Financial Aid Administration said there's no consensus on the question, and the group is trying to understand how the memo could affect student aid. The last thing students need when making plans about how to pay for college is uncertainty over when or whether they can receive financial aid that they've been trying to rely on. So, like, another way of kind of addressing this problem would be to have a universal system, a universal college system. Trump has called for the elimination of the Department of Education, and Elon Musk's Doge has slashed dozens of contracts deemed wasteful. Doge team won a legal victory on Monday when a federal judge declined to block it from federal student loan records. The judge said plaintiff, the University of California Student Association, failed to provide it was harmed by Doge's access to data. Actually insane. But okay. Yeah. No way that a not government agency accessing data could have any harm. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, folks, it's time for me to get out of here. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate you guys being here. You guys are what makes this channel go. Thank you so much. Thank you to Very Nice TV for the raid. And thank you all for joining. Once again, if you enjoy the content, don't forget to hit the follow button. It really does help us out. Join us. We are here Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We do the news. We do the politics. Thank you. Also, thank you to Globus the Elder for hanging out. I appreciate it. Go follow them. And Very Nice TV, go follow them as well. Thank you all. This is, I thought it was Thursday already. Never mind. We got tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be back 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to support the channel, there are many different ways. Keep hitting the like button if you're on the YouTube crew. Thank you all for joining. Keep hitting that like button. Keep subscribing, folks. And Ground Level News, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. On all the things. Yes, on all the things. Subscribe to the Substack. Join the Discord if you want to keep up with the channel. If you want to support the stream directly, make sure you hit that merch store and use the !tip command if you want to support the stream directly. Thank you. ADT, thank you for the stream. I appreciate it. Thank you for being in the YouTube crew. Thank you. Thank you, Michael Hesser, for modding the chat. We'll be back tomorrow. Spread the word far and wide that this is one of the chillest places to be for the news, for the politics. Thank you guys for being here. We'll be back tomorrow around 5 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, folks, please stay safe. Please take care of each other. I love you all, and I hope to see you guys in the next one tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. See ya. Boop the like button, exactly. Thank you, Bad Lefty. Hang tight, folks. We're heading out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bye-bye.